sit right with me. Again, Milano Cortina 2026 is the same as Atlanta, Nashville 1996, which makes absolutely no sense. I hate it, and it's my primary complaint.
Chad, how far can you get away, like distance-wise, before we hit that threshold?
Well, in the Atlanta Olympics, as an example, they had some of the events were in Chattanooga.
Yeah, for the whitewater rafting.
That's fine, but it wasn't the Atlanta Chattanooga Olympics. They just happen to have some events there. You can go to Cortina for some of the events, 4.5 hours away, but Cortina doesn't get the shine. It's Milan. People know Milan. It's the Milan Olympics. It's not both. That's my issue.
Well, my primary complaint actually is part of the Olympics, but cycling. I don't know how often you guys run into this issue, but whenever I'm on the road and I come across a cyclist who is like thinking they own the entire road, it can be pretty problematic, especially trying to get around if it's a 2-lane road. You're on the back roads a little bit. And I just don't understand how the common courtesy of, all right, I'm going to make sure I slow down, allow this car the opportunity to go around whenever you're going to be going 15 miles an hour tops and you got maybe 6, 7 cars behind you. I would like to put forth the proposal that you get like one free bottle throw at a cyclist each year. I doubt I'm going to get many people to go along with that. But at this point, you're not the only one entitled to the road. Move over. Let other people go by.
You remember the day we brought this up and the cyclist that called in?
Oh, my gosh. If you want to get some
this is another reason why we need calls on the show.
Yeah,
Let's get this going.
If you want to get a community fired up, then you say something about the cycling community, and they will get – I think it was like a guy called Bicycle Boy.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, that was him.
That went
Bicycle
through
Boy.
the statutes of, we own that street just as much as you do in your fancy little cars with engines that go faster. You can get the cycling community fired up in a heartbeat, no doubt about it. But, I mean, I'm with you. It's like time and place, right? I think there's a time and place for where to ride your bike. I get that laws, protect them to go where they want.
Yeah, daylight. That's a time and place. Daylight.
I like to go by the law of common sense. Not just the laws that are on the books. Like if you bring a gun to someone at 1:35 a.m., it's actually aiding and abetting into a murder if it happens 5 minutes later after you hand the person the gun. That would be a common sense type thing that may not cover the law. I feel the same way about cyclists. Go somewhere where it's more conducive to cycling that doesn't completely halt my day.
I think we're being generous by calling this the cyclist. A cyclist is going a little bit faster than your average guy on a bike.
The bike messenger?
Yeah. This is guy on a bicycle, not cyclist.
Yeah, true. I'd prefer to say cyclist because it sounds fancier. I like to church things up a little bit.
The guy on the bicycle thinks he's a cyclist.
Yeah. I mean, look, just don't stop my day. Like anything that inconveniences me, is something that's always going to bother. It's perfect fodder for primary complaint when something inconveniences us and then we don't want to deal with it anymore.
They have to stay on the right-hand side of the road, Davey. So if they're on the left, you're good to go. You're good to lay on the horn.
Duly noted.
So this is the connection for Todd Monken to Baltimore. Tom Crean connected them. During his time at Georgia, Monken's wife and Tom Crean's wife became great friends. And then Crean connected John Harbaugh because he's related to the Harbaugh family, right?
Yeah.
And
Tom Crean is married to Joni Harbaugh, who's Jim and John's sister.
So Todd Monken, offensive coordinator for Georgia, national championship years. He is now the offensive coordinator in Baltimore, and that sparked the relationship between Monken and Harbaugh.
So Georgia fans now are thinking,
Crean.
Not only did Tom Crean do nothing with the basketball program and ran it into the ground his time there, but he also gave away our great offensive coordinator to a brother-in-law in his time here. So hats off to Tom Crean in his time in Athens. Really productive for the Bulldogs.
Well,
he sucked throughout, and then he also introduced a guy who was doing very well as offensive coordinator to someone that eventually gave him another job.
So here's Monken, who said this recently. Athens Online has this. If I was going to do it, meaning take the job, I was going to be somewhere that was parallel to Georgia. Part of the reason I went to Georgia, one of the main reasons, was because of the culture. Head coach, winning, really good on defense. Obviously, trying to find a way to be better on offense. I thought that was parallel and it would fit me. And so he went with the attitude of Baltimore is the pro equivalent of Georgia, and I'm here to take the offense to the next level.
And he may be right. I mean, that's...
With Lamar Jackson, yes.
Yeah, and also I think that, like a lot of people, he's looking around and saying, there's a lot of stuff I don't have to deal with in the NFL that I have to deal with right now in college. And just more money isn't always the answer.
And he said, it was something I really wanted to do, NFL.
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to do. That doesn't mean I'm not grateful for Kirby Smart and the coaches I worked with there. I get way too much credit for our success. I came in there and the culture was already set. And I'm excited about what's next. You can't be two places at once. Neither can Lamar Jackson, but he needs to be in Baltimore for Todd Monken to have success. Headlines next.
College football's in trouble. There's a lot of people trying to keep it from happening.
I think it's a general consensus across the college football landscape. We want to play football.
College football is a huge part of the fall. It's a huge part of Americana itself.
It just really felt like people in the country needed college football to just feel a little sense of normal.
Big news from the Big Ten as the conference releasing its 10-game football schedule.
We go home thinking that we're going to be practicing the next day. Everybody gets a text, stay home, everything's canceled.
Big Ten fall football season has been canceled.
We just believe collectively there's too much uncertainty.
I guess what I'm trying to understand, though, Kevin, is that was the same position you had 6 days ago.
The Big Ten is an unmitigated disaster.
There was a ton of confusion. There was presidents saying one thing, there was coaches saying another.
Players had to be silent, coaches had to be silent, ADs had to be silent.
People said, how does what you just did make any sense?
And nobody really knew what the heck happened when they voted to cancel the season.
You make this huge historical announcement, and then Kevin Warren never does a press conference to explain it. It was like a masterclass in how not to handle a crisis.
The word really that was lacking in all of this is transparency.
It felt like a lot of stuff was happening behind closed doors.
Even today, we still don't know what occurred.
So you don't tell us parents, that's fine, but you're not telling the young men that it affects.
We have to make a decision to save the season. What about the history books? What about the rivalry games? What about Paul Bunyan's axe? How is that not going to go to a team this year?
This is a failure of epic magnitude. The Big Ten presidents and leaders should be held accountable for the disastrous decisions that they're making.
Then the commissioner doubles down, saying his decision will not be revisited.
And that's the point. It felt like a war was declared on the Big Ten and Kevin Warren.
Everything turned political.
Because if this is medical, then you would have stopped the game of football a long time ago.
I think the Big Ten leaders will tell you that they probably made a mistake in hindsight.
If I had the chance to do it all over last year, I would make the same decisions that we made.
Coming up in 20 minutes, Aaron Torres will join us, Fox Sports. Talk some college hoops. We'll certainly dive in to all the things going on with Alabama basketball over the last month and a half. Looking forward to Curt Schilling being in studio with us, Chad. That's coming up in an hour. And Clay Travis, every Wednesday, final hour with us. Hope you'll join us as the show rolls on. Headlines out there today. A report from Jeff Darlington that, just reading the quote on ESPN, a very important Packers source is what Darlington points to. Very important Packers source says that Aaron Rodgers will be back with the Packers this season. Take that for what it's worth. We haven't heard from Rodgers. The report from Bob McGinn, highly respected longtime reporter of the Green Bay Packers, says, yeah, they're done with him. They're disgusted with it. We'll see. I'm skeptical of any report right now.
How are they going to win? That would be my follow-up if that's going to be the case. What are they going to do to get better to win? Because they were bad.
That's what Aaron Rodgers has to know too. Right?
What?
Unless you're just like skating on the way in
and way out. What can they do given his contract?
Well,
how much? This is where I don't understand the salary cap, because every time we feel like there's no flexibility, someone comes up with something to manipulate the numbers to get done what they want done if they're on the verge of competing. Now, we've seen other situations where it's clearly bad and there's no getting out of it, and there's a purge.
Well, Atlanta has just been going through it.
Right. But what can they do with the salary cap other than restructure? Is that a possibility?
Invest in through the draft and have Rodgers ready to go. That's why they couldn't keep Devontae Adams. Even though they tagged him last year, they traded him to the Raiders. And it was because, in large part, because of the contract that Rodgers was demanding, and it's going up by $10 million this season. Speaking of salary cap, new record in the books, Cleveland Browns. Quarterback Deshaun Watson, highest cap hit coming up, and it will be this way for the next, 4 seasons, moving forward through 2026. Highest cap hit in league history. Warren Sharp, of our friend from Sharp Football, points out we've never seen a cap hit in any season exceed $39 million. Deshaun Watson this season is going to hit 54.9 in 2023. That's the largest of any player in NFL history. And this will be exactly the same every single season as it is right now in his contract through 2026. They can always restructure and give him more up front and kick the can down the road, so to speak, on the cap hit. But you want to talk about Rodgers and the Packers. Here is Watson and a $54.9 million hit this season and every season moving forward based on that guaranteed money. Better draft well.
If this does not work out, if Watson is not as good as he was in Houston in any way, and Cleveland is not a playoff team quickly, is this the worst move in NFL history?
Yeah, well, yes.
Because it's unprecedented in terms of the guaranteed money and the guaranteed contract and the history of the sport.
If it continues to go at this rate.
Russell Wilson, the deal for him right now has a head start to being one of the worst if he doesn't get better. But now he's got Sean Payton. And also, he didn't get a fully guaranteed contract.
Right.
So they're two different things. Denver is married to Russell Wilson, and they gave up a lot, and they're giving him a lot of money, but they can get out of this. The Browns cannot get out of this if it doesn't work. They are locked in. It could be the worst ever, right?
Yeah, and we've seen some bad deals by Cleveland.
But you do it because you say, all right, Deshaun Watson, when healthy and playing, is a top 5 quarterback in the league. But Deshaun Watson, having spent as much time away from the game as he has now, trying to come back, if he doesn't come out lights out this season, I'm really skeptical that he's ever going to get back to what he was in Houston because of the layoff, because of the sideshow with the masseuses and everything else. Mm-hmm. He's never going to get back to it. And if that's the case, Jimmy Haslam and the Browns have made the worst move in the history of the league.
And it could also be that what turns them around at the quarterback position, right? This is an organization that since Kelly Holcomb, it took all the way to Baker Mayfield to get to the postseason in 2020. And they're trying to get over the hump and actually do more than that, than just go to the divisional round of this. But Yeah,
they're doing it to win a Super Bowl.
Well, yeah.
I mean, when you make the move, like this is a move done to say we're going to win a Super Bowl and it's all going to be worth it.
You're putting all your chips though in the draft, and you also have to be patient now because you traded your top picks away to get Deshaun Watson. That pick's now in Houston. So how much can you give him right now? You've got to have some speed at receiver, that's for sure. And they got to invest in the run game. The run game was really good at times with Chubb, but then slow in the biggest games, the divisional games. They could not get the run going up front. Got to have it with Watson coming back.
You got to, but so much of this
we only saw 6 games from him.
It's on Watson. I mean, ultimately, it's you just look at it and say, this guy got an unprecedented contract to play quarterback. You better make everyone around you better. I don't care if there's one spot that's a little bit lacking. You're getting this contract to be the guy and to improve everyone. So I'm very skeptical. I know it's a small sample size late in the year, but he was really bad. This is a big offseason for him, obviously, in the Browns. If he comes out and looks like the old Deshaun Watson, great. And if the Browns are winning, we're saying, okay, now if they add a piece here, a piece there, maybe they can get into contention. If he looks like he did at the end of this past season when he came in and played, bad news for the Browns.
Deshaun Watson getting paid. Marshawn Lynch recently went into detail about all the fines that he had for just not speaking to the media. And he joined Darren Bates, former NFL linebacker, former Auburn Tiger, Darren Bates. He joined Darren's podcast and explained how much, in fact, he did dish out for not speaking to the media.
So what I thought is, all right, it take them to come in there probably like 15, 20 minutes after the game is over, right? I done already probably done went in the locker room maybe with 2.5 minutes on there because we done already won the game. So I done already showered. By the time the team come in there, you feel me? I'm gone. So they, well, where Marshawn at? Oh, he not here. He gone. So if I wasn't there, then how could I make myself available?
Hold on, you
feel what I'm talking about?
You didn't get the end of the game speech?
Nah, it was, you feel? Man, I can't. It was tough, man. I had the family outside. We gotta get to the, you feel me? So the fines started, accumulating, and it was from seasons before. And now, you feel me, they run it up. So it got, you feel me, though, it got to a pretty penny, though. You feel what I'm talking about?
What the number
My biggest
like?
fine was
2.2 million. What was your biggest fine?
You got me 1.2 from just not talking to the media.
1.2?
Yeah.
You were 2.2?
Yeah.
That was from the 2 years? Yeah.
What about you, Lindell?
I think I was probably around like 60K.
I'm right there with you, about 85,000. That's it.
No way.
Listen, shout out to Jeff.
It was entertaining.
It's a fun conversation with those guys for sure.
What happens to this fine money? Because it's taken out of the direct deposit.
It goes to NFL charities, right?
I've often wondered though,
that's the common line.
It goes to NFL charities, but if Clay wants to make a charitable donation, he gets to write that off on taxes. Does Marshawn Lynch get to write off $1.2 million on taxes?
I would hope so. That's a great point. I mean, I think that they can give you the paperwork, I feel like, to show that it's a charitable donation.
Yeah.
That you're making out of your paycheck, and at least you get to write that off for taxes.
But it's a fine. He's being disciplined, though.
It's ridiculous if you but
the NFL's giving it to charity. They're benefiting if the player's not. That's why I'm bringing it up. The NFL's definitely writing it off.
If the NFL, but hear me out here. It's their personal income that is going, it's the NFL fine, but it's going through the NFL.
Yes.
It's like money laundering,
of their
right?
choosing, yes.
And it's going to, it's like Walter White with the car wash. But then it's going to the charity. So it's still their personal income it's coming out of. So I think the charitable donation should go to the option to the player to file it as a charitable donation, even though it's a fine.
And
I would hope so.
I like to think that it's all in the up and up and everything's cool, but I've often wondered how that goes about come tax time, especially for these dudes that have to play in multiple states and all the tax codes in multiple states. So if you play that week in California, you're taxed on California codes, even if you live in Nashville and play for the Titans.
It's crazy how just nonchalant Marshawn Lynch is talking about that. And here's the other thing about Marshawn Lynch. It amazes me that a guy who's done so many interviews and podcasts, and he did the Manning cast and everything else throughout his career, talks all the time, just would spend that much money to not talk. It's not like he's a complete introvert that doesn't want to talk to people or be on camera or on mic, but he just refused to talk to the media to the detriment of himself.
Well, I don't know,
to spend money.
Well, he did spend money. You're right. He was fine. But he's more well known for the quote than he is his play. I'm just here so I won't get fined that's living forever. It's what he's known for. You mentioned Lynch. It's the Super Bowl presser, the media day.
Yeah, it's just.
And he's also known for not getting the football in the final play where Malcolm Butler made the pick.
Maybe that helped him enough to offset based on everyone knowing him for that reason.
Yeah.
But I also don't know that he was thinking that when he did it. You would think that like someone, Zach Greinke's got the social anxiety disorder or whatever, right? So they had to limit his exposure to media. But it would be someone like that, I would think, that would willingly pay that much money to not speak to people, to not even answer a single question from the media because it just petrifies them to talk to a group. Not Marshawn Lynch, who's a total extrovert and loves talking to people every time he's in front of a mic.
Isn't it interesting, though, that players, if asked, they need to be made available once per week for media to be in the locker room, or at least that was the rule through the Writers Association, made available once a week to the press in order to chat. Definitely no owner has to do that, right?
Yeah.
We know officials don't. There's a pool reporter, but, the pool reporter is more worried about the deadline or getting the story from the game, let's be honest there, than the 3 or 4 questions that it's going to take to discuss the official for quotes that everyone's going to use. And it's the players that get fined for not speaking, which, look, we all benefit from, but nowadays, practically everyone's willing to do it. And Lynch hated it. $1.2 million. You think he misses that? My guess is no.
He probably got, who knows what he makes now to offset it. I would think he misses it, though. And that's $1.2 million. Again, to just do something that he does all the time. That's what's odd to me.
He was fined the same amount that Brian Kelly was overpaid at LSU, Chad. Hard to believe.
He did have to pay that money back, though. Brian Kelly did. That banker's error.
Aaron Torres is about to join us. The storyline right now is with Alabama hoops and Brandon Miller, and the fact that we now know through law enforcement testimony at the preliminary hearing yesterday in the capital murder case that took place on January 15th that involved the Alabama player and Darius Miles, that Miller brought the weapon to the scene. And we'll begin there because they play tonight, and indications are he's playing tonight.
Yeah, before we get into that with Aaron Torres, I didn't want to bring this up because, again, so many people are saying, here's some clarity for you guys. This is why he wasn't charged with a crime. Nothing I've ever stated involves him having to get charged with a crime in order for the university or the program to act. Let's be clear about that. People are suspended or kicked off the team at all times for non-criminal activity or possible criminal activity that did not result in charges being levied, right?
Yep.
Trey Wallace did a good job digging here. He got a hold of the Alabama Student Handbook, story up at Outkick.com right now. He found at least 2 rules the school could have used to handle some sort of punishment, hand punishment out to Brandon Miller. One is possession or use of a dangerous weapon, firearm, on university premises in violation of the university, including but not limited to the university's dangerous weapons and firearms policy. This goes back to they had it on campus. He went back to retrieve it on campus and then went to the bar. That's something the university could have done. The other one is another transportation of firearms violation that is against University of Alabama policy. I say all this to say
that second part
that
tracks.
The university, whatever you want to say about criminal charges and all that, the university knowingly, willfully, knowing about this, did nothing about this.
And they have done nothing
about
explain
Brandon
why.
Miller.
To explain why.
Zero explanation.
We don't know, but see, this is the detail I need. We don't know that he went back to campus to retrieve the weapon. All we know is Darius Miles told law enforcement that he told Miller where the gun was in the car that he left in the car that Miller was driving, and he brought it back to him. We don't know he went back to campus to retrieve it. It could have been in the car the entire time. Sounds like it was. but we don't know if he was on campus and came back, if he knowingly knew, like if he knew what he was doing and why he was bringing it there. Don't know. But Alabama and law enforcement seem to think that the story checks out. For whatever reason, they won't tell us the details as to why. All we know are the details from the investigator, the police on the site.
And we want to give as much detail as possible on the show about everything. But what we are doing now is going through verbal acrobatics to try to just say something that's very clear and obvious to anyone with a brain.
Right.
The dude should not have brought a weapon to a guy at 1:35 a.m. after he had been drinking at a bar. And the fact that bringing the weapon to that guy ended up in a young mother's murder is a huge problem that should have been dealt with, other than Nate Oates coming out and saying, oh, he's not in trouble at all. Wrong place, wrong time. It's way more than wrong place, wrong time. And I don't want to get caught up in all the little technicalities about Alabama law and this and that. Use your brain. And anytime we got people in the chat room right now, and I'm saying, would you not think something was up if any one of your friends asked for a weapon back at 1:35 a.m.? Would you maybe think, maybe I shouldn't do this, maybe something bad will happen, and maybe you do something and nothing bad happens, but something really bad happened? So that should be dealt with. It should have been dealt with by Nate Oates first. If not Nate Oates, one of his bosses at the university should have dealt with it. Instead, they have sacrificed everything on the altar of, we just want to win basketball games.
And the optics are they're protecting their star player.
And it's not even the optics. It's what's happening.
It's
And Hutton, you're demanding them to talk and explain what his side is. I'm with you on it. I don't believe it'll ever happen. He's not going to appear until he goes to the NBA draft. He is not going to do any interviews. Brandon Miller, I'm talking about. Nate Oates will not fully answer questions about it. He's released his BS apology on what he said yesterday. They're not going to say a word. This kid's going to keep playing. Alabama's going to keep winning. And they're just telling everybody else to shut up.
Well, the mushroom cloud is just forming with all of this. Aaron Torres picks up the story with us next on Outkick 360.
So can you explain to the viewers who might not know anything about MMA, and I got to be honest with you, I'm a casual UFC fan. I watch the big cards, but I'm not an expert in the nitty-gritty. Like, what is the traditional path for, like, an MMA guy if he's chasing to get to the top of that world? Like, what's that look like? We know what it looks like for football. We know what it looks like for basketball. How's that play out for an MMA fighter?
I mean, that's the big difference between MMA and like the traditional sports you're talking about. Like, you have the collegiate, that line of going, and then in mixed martial arts, you don't really have, I mean, you have the wrestlers aspects, but being a good wrestler doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a great MMA fighter. So it really looks a lot different for everybody. I mean, I was a traditional martial artist as a kid growing up, and then I found MMA was big because when we were on the same age when I was in high school, that's when the UFC started, like Chuck Liddell and like, all those guys started like, building the sport like crazy. And that's how I found it. I was just originally actually a hockey player. I played like competitive high school. I played junior hockey.
Oh, you played juniors? Where at?
Yep. I played on the East Coast in the EJ, East Coast Hockey League. So yeah. And not East Coast Professional Hockey League, but EJ was up in the north. It was good. It was good hockey. We played again. I mean, I see guys I played against that are in the NHL all the time, and I went to a high school literally just for hockey. I went to a prep school for a little bit just for hockey, and that was like my initial that's what kind of gave me that competitive athletic part of myself that I was definitely able to apply into the military, and I was definitely able to apply into fighting as well. So what happened is my senior year of high school, I was playing juniors. I decided that I wanted to come back to high school to play for my high school just because of, I don't know, girls and stuff or something. I don't know why I did it, but I came back to my high school. I came back to my high school hockey team. I played it. We were doing really good. It was a playoff game, and my first shift of the game was like big playoff game. I blew on my shoulder. I went to go hit a kid, blew on my shoulder. So my following year, I missed a lot of like the times we hit tryouts in the summer to play for the teams in the next winter for like good junior teams. And that's kind of when I picked up MMA because like I wasn't, you know what I mean? I kind of got more into MMA then. I was like, it just kind of gave me an outlet that wasn't, I always put all my energy into hockey. Now this gave me a separate outlet and it was MMA, and I got competitive into that, did that for 2 years, and then until I eventually joined the military. So I think MMA fighters, they really could come from any branch, you know what I mean? But like for me, I played a lot of other sports growing up, and I think that helped me train like a professional athlete to be a professional MMA fighter.
So I got to ask, what's it like to get punched in the face?
Obviously I try not to get punched in the face as much as possible. I do not like to get punched in the face. I feel like, which is probably not a good thing, but over time you kind of get used to it. You know what I mean? I don't even blink my eyes when I get punched in the face. I remember when I used to get punched, get rocked, you get like this adrenaline feeling, like, oh my God, what happened? I don't really get that too much. It's either I'm getting knocked out or I'm just okay. So it's not the best feeling, but I try to avoid it. You know, I try to be smarter because concussions, you know, you're hearing all these things about concussions this day and age, and I try to only do my hard sparring only when I need to for my fights. I used to, when I was a kid, I used to just, let's go spar. It's fun. I love it. You know what I mean? Not anymore. I try to be smart about what I do.
Well, when it comes to the preparing for a fight, now what's your record as a pro since you've gone pro?
I am 5-1.
5-1, and
yep.
That's wildly impressive. So if you were an NFL team with that winning record, you'd be amazing, right?
Sixth and Peabody, our location. Yeehaw Beer, Old Smoky Moonshine. Glad you're with us across the Outkick Network for Outkick 360. Hutton and Withrow with you. Curt Schilling joins us in a little over 30 minutes in studio, plus Clay Travis in an hour. First, though, Aaron Torres joins us, Fox Sports Radio host and college basketball insider. Aaron, crazy story from Tuscaloosa and everything developing and comments made and then press releases made from Nate Oates. What we heard Nate Oates say in the press release today was, well, I chose my words poorly. We didn't hear him say Brandon Miller and discipline is coming. What do you make of it?
I'll tell you, I mean, on the one hand, I mean, I'm stunned, right? I mean, like, I think anybody that covers sports, that has been around sports, and have been, like, it's insane that Brandon Miller is still representing, like at the baseline level. We can get into all the context, and I'm sure you guys just spent the last 2 days talking about it. Like, but at the end of the day, it is kind of wild that Brandon Miller is still representing the University of Alabama. But what was clear to me with not just the opening statement yesterday, but really the follow-up statement, was that Alabama is kind of digging their heels in on this one. And I think their thought process is kind of twofold. And I'm not saying you should agree or disagree with it, but I think what they're thinking is pretty straightforward, is he hasn't been charged with a crime. And I think the other part that we all, I do understand this part as well, is this isn't the type of thing that you suspend a guy a game for. Like, it's not, whatever, getting too drunk and showing up hungover for practice. Like this is, if you believe that that he should not be playing tonight against South Carolina representing your university, then you basically have to indefinitely suspend him until there's either new information that clears him or whatever. And I don't think any new information is coming out at this point, at least certainly not in the near future, certainly not for the rest of the regular season. So I'll be blunt, like I think it's crazy, and I want to make sure that I make that clear. I think it's wild that he is representing the University of Alabama, and not just Nate Oates, but the people above Nate Oates are letting him represent Alabama. But I thought with the second statement where Nate Oates said late on Tuesday night that, no other student athletes are suspects right now, they were only witnesses, that was Alabama making the statement that we made our decision, whatever it was, 5 weeks ago when this initial crime happened, and we're not backing down from that decision at this point.
So is this something that will always follow Nate Oates around? Clearly the guy can coach basketball, and he's winning at a high level at Alabama, but is this something that goes away 5 years from now, or no matter what level of success that he has, will there always be people that point to, yeah, but remember that time one of your players murdered someone and your star player gave him his gun back that ended up murdering the young woman? Are we always going to talk about this?
So 2 quick things on that. One, I will go back to the night that the actual murder happened, or the follow-up day when the player was arrested. I was kind of blown away that there wasn't more coverage. And I understand it was football season, NFL was still going on, all that stuff. But I thought at least even locally or the first few road games, there would be questions about why was this guy, again, a representative of your university? Were there any signs when you recruited him? Were there any signs when he was in the program that he was capable of something like this? And it really felt like that first day, Nate Oates made a statement, and then it was kind of just gone. And so, one, I was a little surprised by that. But to answer your question, Chad, college sports is interesting because it's like when something bad happens, and I think we all understand that I'm not equating a murder to NCAA violations or whatever, but it feels like it always sticks with you as long as you're at that place, because it feels like you didn't get punished for whatever injustice, right? So, and again, I'm not comparing one to the other, but Rick Pitino at Louisville. Rick Pitino gets fired from Louisville. Now all of a sudden he's at Iona, and there are people that want him to coach their high major team. Sean Miller, who was at Arizona, he was there for 3-4 years while that FBI investigation unfolded, and everybody kind of sat there and said he should be fired. He should be fired. Well, now he's back at Xavier, and everybody's like, oh, okay, like Sean Miller paid his debt to society, if you will. So I hope I'm clear. I'm not comparing murder to NCAA rules violations or whatever, alleged murder to rules violations or whatever. But it is weird. It does feel like in college sports specifically, we are forgiving if we feel like there has been some sort of punishment served, justice served, whatever. But if Nate Oates stays at Alabama, I think there's going to be that thought that you just expressed, Chad, the thought that this is a great basketball coach. Nobody denies that. But man, oh man, remember when he had that lottery pick and he seemingly covered up for a lottery pick because that guy was helping him win games? I don't think that is something that will escape him anytime soon if he stays at Alabama. And right now, at least, I don't think there's any reason to think that he won't be at Alabama for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and now Brandon Miller's attorney has just released a statement with some more, I don't know if there's details, but some clarification on his behalf about what happened that night. We'll get into momentarily. Let's talk some basketball, though, right now, Aaron. Some Blue Bloods. Kentucky now firmly in the field after beating Tennessee for a second time. North Carolina still trying to earn their way there. When you look at Kentucky with all of that talent, how dangerous of a team is this in the tournament to maybe make a run, even with not so favorable of a seed? And what do you think about the chances that North Carolina will eventually play their way into this tournament and maybe be the most deadly, 11 or 12 seed that the tournament's ever seen?
Well, I'll start with North Carolina. They need to start winning now. They don't have so quad one, for people who are kind of new to college basketball or just getting into it, quad one wins are the best wins that you can have in kind of the metrics that we use to pick NCAA tournament teams. They don't have a single quad one win, or at least they didn't as of a day or two ago when they lost to NC State. So if they get in right now, it will strictly be because the front of their jersey says North Carolina. People are interested in seeing them. They played for a national championship a year ago. Now, they still have a little time to make up ground. They have Duke at home. They have Virginia on the road. So there are ways for them to pick up wins, but it doesn't change the fact that Right now, they don't have a resume of an NCAA tournament team. Now, Kentucky, I think, is different. And listen, man, every time I say anything about Calipari, oh, you always defend Calipari. All I'll say is, listen, he's got some really bad losses on his resume this year specifically, South Carolina and Georgia specifically. But going into the Georgia game, they lost 2 key players to injury, and they kind of had to make do on the fly. It's kind of like what's going on with Rick Barnes right now. I know you guys are in Tennessee. I'm not defending Rick Barnes, but this was a different team when Josiah Jordan-James and Julian Phillips were healthy. Not saying they would have won last night against A&M, not saying they would have won at Rupp Arena, not saying Rick Barnes isn't partially to blame for that. But I bring it up because with Kentucky, you can even go back to the preseason. Oscar Tshiebwe gets surgery a month before the season, misses the whole preseason, doesn't practice up until the lead up of the first game. And it's been one kind of this after the other. This guy gets hurt, then this guy comes back. And it feels like Kentucky is finally starting to hit their groove. So I think the fact that they're playing really well now we'll see what happens. They're playing Florida tonight on the road. But 2, I think the other thought, and it's what everybody's saying, and it's the truth, is that this year there are no dominant teams. Alabama, frankly, is probably the best team when they're at their best, and we'll see, obviously, if their roster kind of makeup stays the way that it is going forward. But, you look at Kentucky with a dominant big man in Tshiebwe, an NBA, at least a first-round pick, maybe a lottery pick, Cason Wallace playing point guard. I don't really see the teams, the group of teams in the tournament that Kentucky has no shot against. Again, they still have work to do to make sure that they're in. But I think once they get in, if they play the way that they have really most of the last 2-3 weeks, I think they'll not only be in pretty good shape, but I think they could certainly pull a couple upsets.
Aaron Torres, you can hear him on Fox Sports Radio. Aaron, always great to catch up, man. And hopefully we can get you on before tournament time, which is just around the corner.
It's coming fast. It's crazy how fast it's coming. But thank you guys very much. Brendan Miller's story is crazy. I'm actually curious to see what his attorney had to say. And thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Aaron. Aaron Torres there, Fox Sports Radio. Chad, so his attorney for Brandon Miller's attorney has released a statement, and you have it pulled up there?
Yeah, it's pretty long, but I guess I'll get into it.
So let me give a background here real fast. So he's going to reference a video. There's a ring camera that has been mentioned in court at the preliminary hearing. Sounds like there's a ring camera that caught everyone trying to flee the scene, attempting to when they heard the gunfire. So as you go through it, when he mentions that everything's clearly on video, that's the video he's referencing, I believe, based on what everyone has reported from the courtroom yesterday.
Yeah, so here's the statement. As one of the attorneys for Brandon Miller, I want to provide additional facts on Brandon's behalf. In response to misstatements and reporting yesterday regarding Brandon, Brandon and his family are horrified and saddened by the events that led to the senseless death of Miss Harris and continue to offer their most sincere thoughts and prayers for her family.
This is already better than Nate Oates' statement.
Yeah, this is clearly drafted by a lawyer representing Brandon Miller and doing a very good job as a lawyer. On January 14th, Brandon played in a basketball game in the afternoon and later was asked by Darius Miles for a ride to the strip area to go to a nightclub. Mr. Miles brought his legal handgun and left it in the back seat of Brandon's vehicle. Brandon never saw the handgun nor handled it. Further, it is our understanding that the weapon was concealed under some clothing in the back seat of the car. Brandon did not go inside the nightclub. A lot of this we knew. Instead, he left and went to a restaurant to eat. At approximately midnight, Mr. Miles began asking Brandon to come pick him up so they could leave and go to another location and join friends. Brandon advised that he would be along later. And approximately 1 hour later, Brandon began to leave the restaurant and pick up Mr. Miles, but first had to give another companion a ride home. Before Brandon arrived to pick up Mr. Miles and the individual with Miss Harris apparently exchanged words. Without Brandon knowing any of this context, and as Brandon was already on the way to pick up Mr. Miles texted Brandon and asked him to bring him, let me go to page 2, if I can find it.
The firearm.
Bring him his firearm. Hutton, do you have it in front of you? Because
Brandon subsequently arrived at the scene to pick up Mr. Miles. Brandon never got out of his vehicle or interacted with anyone in Miss Harris's party. He was never involved in the verbal altercation with Cedric Johnson or Mr. Davis. Brandon never touched the gun, was not involved in its exchange to Mr. Davis in any way, never knew that illegal activity involving the gun would occur. Brandon did not block the Jeep driven by Mr. Johnson. In fact, Brandon had already parked on Grace Street when the Jeep pulled up behind him. The street was never blocked by Brandon's vehicle. Gunfire erupted shortly after the Jeep arrived, and Brandon's vehicle was struck by bullets fired from one of the guns. Brandon quickly left the area when gunfire erupted. As soon as he was notified that someone had been injured and the police wished to speak with him, he has fully cooperated with law enforcement's investigation. All of the events described above are clearly captured on video. There is no dispute about Brandon's activities during this evening. Brandon has submitted to multiple interviews to assist law enforcement in further understanding the situation. He has volunteered to have his phone contents extracted, as well as that of the contents of his automobile. He will continue to cooperate, as any citizen should, who has witnessed a serious incident. Brandon does not own a firearm, has never even handled a firearm. Moreover, he had no knowledge of any intent to use the weapon. That from his attorney, Jim Standridge. And this goes back to the text message exchanged. The text to him was just bring it back. It was already in the car.
Bring back the peace.
Bring back the peace. There's no indication that he was on campus, that he knew where it was in the car, that it's a legal firearm according to Brandon Miller's attorney. It was his legal gun that he had brought back to him. So not knowing the situation, knowing that it's a legal firearm, not knowing where it was in the car, and having no idea what the intent was when it was arriving on the scene, that's the story that Alabama and law enforcement are pointing to whenever they say, hey, nothing we can do here. Wrong place, wrong time. But that's his side of it. Clearly captured on video, which is the Ring camera from one of the nearby areas.
That he fled when things went down, which they said in that.
And my guess is everyone fled when things went down. I think that's his point, is everyone's running away.
Yeah, look, it's a good job of being his attorney in this, right?
Yeah.
I think the big question that I or anyone else would have was, if someone says, bring back the peace, my response would be, what? If you had no knowledge that a weapon was in the car or it was being hidden somewhere, I'd have a lot of questions about that if that were me involved and not just driving back to where we were to pick something up. What do you mean, the peace? I don't have the peace. I don't know what you're talking about if you're completely ignorant to it and not just coming back and showing up. So that would be the questions I would have. And again, I don't think we've ever said the guy should be arrested based on the law, because they do have to prove intent. It's going to be very hard to prove that. And
handling of it from
I don't think Brandon Miller, came back and handed someone a gun and said, now go kill this girl. I know what you're going to do.
Yeah.
I just think that it's naive to think that he didn't know something was up, having gone back and receiving these texts.
But, I mean, it depends so everyone is saying that this is accurate based on what law enforcement has been told. And if it's a legal handgun and you can say that you didn't know the intent of why something was going to be used or what was going to go down, and it's a legal gun, based on, again, this statement here from the attorney, this is why we're seeing the deputy chief district attorney say that they can't charge him with anything. But you can discipline him in some way for doing that if you're Alabama, if you're Nate Oates. They're choosing not to. And by the way, this isn't something that they've decided to do over the last 24 to 48 hours. They haven't done anything since January 15th, when Nate Oates admitted yesterday that they've known about this and that they've gone through all the channels to clearly understand why he doesn't deserve any punishment, why he's never been in quote-unquote trouble.
Yeah, look, we're getting one attorney's statement that's defending their client,
and this is
wholeheartedly.
These are the details I'm talking about whenever there's speculation going on, and all you hear is wrong place, wrong time. That's not good enough based on the loss of life, based on the capital murder charges that both of these men face.
No.
And the text about where the gun was and that it was loaded, Miller was not involved in that. This was the exchange between Darius Miles after the gun arrived and where it was for Michael Davis to go retrieve it.
But the text was sent to Miller about bring the peace.
Bring the car back around.
Yeah.
Because of what he needed to get. Yeah.
Yeah.
His legal handgun. It's I'm really intrigued to see what Nate Oates says post-game today or tonight.
I'm really intrigued to see if he speaks at all. I just don't think they're going to talk.
I think he will. They've got to talk. They have to explain this.
I would hope so.
They were speaking to the media after the incident originally on January 15th, so I don't know why they wouldn't speak now publicly, right? I mean, they did post-game at Vandy.
If they knew all of this all along, I just keep coming back to how are you so ill-prepared if you're Nate Oates to handle that question?
That's what I said to begin the show.
And to say those things. How are you not ahead of this?
This isn't just some flippant new news that you're reacting to in real time, like Tiger last week reacting to the...
Yeah, but we've said all along, Brandon Miller's clearly cooperating with the police, and they've said as much, and he's a witness on all this, right?
Yeah.
So if you know that and you know he's on the scene, and you know that his vehicle housed the weapon, the murder weapon, how are you not more on top of this if you're Alabama and out in front of it?
Yeah.
I'd want to be out in front of this before it's released in court, and then you've got your head coach saying dumb things.
And all the details behind the whole incident, on top of the fact that you have the quote from Nate Oates after the original charges and the arrest took place, where he's focused on the victim, and then yesterday focused on the star player saying, yeah, we've known about this, nothing to see, wrong place, wrong time. Paraphrasing, but I mean, again, like, it's just it was handled so poorly in this situation. And now it's become a circus of what they care about, what they don't, instead of here's why we're okay with the decision we made, and behind the scenes we've known about this. Hit us up with your thoughts at Outkick 360. You can join us in the chat as well on YouTube. We got Curt Schilling coming in studio in around 20 minutes. When we come back, Dwight Howard, he is playing, not in the NBA. He's playing professionally in Taiwan. And he got in the mix, got into scrum. A brawl broke out. We've got it next on Outkick 360.
Welcome into Outkick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life. ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
So the higher that number can be, the better you are with the committee. It's really that simple.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
He's got incredible taste in which media figures he listens to.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the #1 overall pick.
I have been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose.
The scary thing, Tommy, is in the history of this government, I've never seen them give anything back that they've taken.
Oh no, they never do.
And they won't.
Why are we going through Melania's goods? Don't make Brittany Griner out to be some type freedom fighter. Shouldn't there be a little bit of common sense? Let's roll them, big boy. What do you got?
They want to find someone to be the face of domestic terrorism, and they want it to be a right-wing Trump supporter. Don't let them entrap you into doing something dumb. But they were hyper-rational. They looked at the data, and they said it makes no sense for me to submit to this COVID shot mandate.
Get the shot or you can't go to your brother's wedding. Get the shot or you can't go to your daughter's graduation. Get the shot or else.
Curt Schilling and Clay Travis join us in the upcoming hour.
Big
Outkick
hour
360
coming up.
rolls on.
Big hour.
Across the Outkick Network. 6th and Peabody, our location with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Chad, I haven't watched much NBA. I have watched some, passing by, background. But this is a league I can get behind, the T1 League in Taiwan.
Based on what happened,
I did not know that Dwight Howard was still playing professionally. He is. I know he had a tryout for the WWE here in Nashville last summer. And now he's in Taiwan playing hoops. 18 seasons in the NBA. Now he's in the T1 League. He's playing for the Leopards. It's the Leopards against the Hero Bears.
That's a great nickname, the Hero Bears.
And a massive brawl breaks out, and you have 6'10" Dwight Howard separating guards, these guard play, which got physical, elbows to the face, punches thrown. I mean, we hear about brawls. This is a legit brawl where benches clearing, coaches, other individuals getting involved, and then just randomly, he's out of frame because he's so tall. Dwight Howard is just separating people like a WWE event.
How much money is Dwight Howard making in Taiwanese basketball these days?
I don't know.
I mainly thought he's got to make way more than everyone else, right? He's got to be the draw in this Taiwanese league.
You think they pay like Live Tour?
I don't think the Taiwanese have the money that the Saudis possess.
But it has to be enough to
to want to do it.
Dwight Howard's salary, and this is according to Google, $1 million is his salary to play for the Leopards.
I mean, he just must really want to play basketball. Because that's not a ton of money to go play in Taiwan.
Or maybe his girl's in Taiwan. I don't know.
Could be.
No clue.
May like the nightlife in Taiwan. Who knows? That's an outstanding brawl, though. You really got to go abroad to see good brawls now in sports,
Yeah.
I think. The American sports are devoid of brawls to that level.
You know how Keith Bullock once said, these guys don't want to fight. That's the look that Howard had on his face as he's separating people. Everyone's throwing punches except at Dwight Howard, who's just in the middle of it.
I think if you're in the
aside.
Taiwanese basketball league and you look up and Dwight Howard is staring down at you, that's probably not the guy you want to throw punches to, right? You want to avoid that at all costs.
It also appeared I don't get the sense he was in the game at the time either. It looked like he just came from the bench. But if you're 6'10", I don't know why you're not in the game in this game in particular. Chad, the coach Withrow, would absolutely have it in the post.
Oh yeah, you're feeding Dwight Howard the rock in Taiwanese basketball.
No doubt.
That's number one, right? You let Dwight eat in that league, whether it be a brawl or whether it be in the post.
Brandon Miller's attorney released a statement, Chad, minutes ago on the day that Alabama will play against South Carolina, and he's giving Brandon Miller's side of the story from January 15th, where he drove the vehicle that brought the weapon to the scene that ended up being a incident that we have capital murder charges stemming from, where a 23-year-old single mother lost her life at the bar on the Strip in Tuscaloosa. 2 other men involved in this, and Miller was connected through driving the car that brought the weapon to the scene. No charges filed against him. Nate Oates, head coach, hasn't done anything discipline-wise since January 15th. They've been okay with this. But underneath the surface, you have this story. He's been playing. He's playing tonight. And Alabama and Nate Oates did a poor job of explaining this as to why they've been okay with it. Instead, pointing to the fact that he regrets the way he phrased certain statements yesterday instead of explaining why he felt to say wrong place, wrong time, guys go out, and, it's unfortunate because he doesn't get into trouble.
Yeah, he's letting Brandon Miller's attorney now do whatever explaining is going on about Brandon Miller's part in this. And really the only big difference from, I guess, the lack of detail that was in the testimony with the cop, or however you want to phrase it, is that Brandon Miller's attorney is claiming he had no knowledge of a gun at all, but then it kind of leaves it out about, received a text about it that we saw was about bringing back the piece and bringing back the car to pick him up. And in that, saying it was hidden behind clothing in the backseat of his car is the claim from his attorney.
Well, and
again, I think that
also makes that follows what the other 2 men charged in
We're
this have
texting
said,
about, yeah.
but have said also to investigators that they told each other where it was in the car and how to get to it instead of, oh, it's in the front seat, right? It was very specific. I think
very specific
that's clear
spot.
to law enforcement.
So, look, I think that, in terms of discipline, the logic you'd have to ask yourself is, do you believe the account that there was no knowledge from Brandon Miller, having been in that car, having driven to separate places throughout the night, that he had no knowledge there was a gun in the backseat of the car? I think that's very difficult to believe for me, but it's also a plausible defense for Brandon Miller based on the evidence they have with text messages and everything else. And the fact that they know because the Ring camera footage and his claims that he got away once the gunshots happened, right? He fled the part. The other thing was, the cars blocked the other car in that was shot into. They did not dispute that it was Brandon Miller's car parked in front that could have been blocking in, but the claim is he was already parked there and they happened to park behind him.
Right.
So his car was placed in front of him when the shooting happened. Well, in front of the other vehicle, the victim's vehicle that she was in.
Which is why, in the explanation, why his windshield was struck twice by gunfire.
Look, it's a terrible situation. It's awful all the way around. It's tragic. It's embarrassing with what Nate Oates said. You've got Greg McElroy, former Alabama quarterback, saying how embarrassed he is by the whole situation. And the fact that nothing has been done other than Darius Miles, who really wasn't even a part of the team at the time because he's kind of on again, off again with the team, being removed. There's been no other discipline at all. Not a 1-game suspension, 2-game suspension for being around all of this. Nothing. And that makes the whole thing even more embarrassing.
25 minutes away from our visit with Clay Travis. When we come back, Curt Schilling in studio. He joins Outkick with the Curt Schilling Talks Baseball podcast. He's with us next on Outkick 360.
College football's in trouble. There's a lot of people trying to keep it from happening.
I think it's a general consensus across the college football landscape. We want to play football.
College football is a huge part of the fall. It's a huge part of Americana itself.
It just really felt like people in the country needed college football to just feel a little sense of normal.
Big news from the Big Ten as the conference releasing its 10-game football schedule.
We go home thinking that we're going to be practicing the next day. Everybody gets a text, stay home, everything's canceled.
Big Ten fall football season has been canceled.
We just believe collectively there's too much uncertainty.
I guess what I'm trying to understand, though, Kevin, is that was the same position you had 6 days ago.
The Big Ten is an unmitigated disaster.
There was a ton of confusion. There was presidents saying one thing, there was coaches saying another.
Players had to be silent, coaches had to be silent, ADs had to be silent.
People said, how does what you just did make any sense?
And nobody really knew what the heck happened when they voted to cancel the season.
You make this huge historical announcement, and then Kevin Warren never does a press conference to explain it. It was like a masterclass in how not to handle a crisis.
The word really that was lacking in all of this is transparency.
It felt like a lot of stuff was happening behind closed doors.
Even today, we still don't know what occurred.
So you don't tell us parents, that's fine, but you're not telling the young men that it affects.
We have to make a decision to save the season. What about the history books? What about the rivalry games? What about Paul Bunyan's axe? How is that not going to go to a team this year?
This is a failure of epic magnitude. The Big Ten presidents and leaders should be held accountable for the disastrous decisions that they're making.
Then the commissioner doubles down, saying his decision will not be revisited.
And that's the point. It felt like a war was declared on the Big Ten and Kevin Warren.
Everything turned political.
Because if this is medical, then you would have stopped the game of football a long time ago.
I think the Big Ten leaders will tell you that they probably made a mistake in hindsight.
If I had the chance to do it all over last year, I would make the same decisions that we made.
Just like that, the final hour is here for Outkick 360 across the Outkick Network. Glad you're with us. Wednesday edition that includes Clay Travis, who will join us in 20 minutes. 6th and Peabody, our location, with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. We've been discussing the ongoing topic that is in Tuscaloosa and beyond with SEC Hoops, Alabama, best player in Brandon Miller, and whether or not there should be team discipline for him for bringing the weapon that was involved in a capital murder charge against Darius Miles and Michael Davis in Tuscaloosa, just a block from campus. Greg McElroy, earlier this morning down in Birmingham, Chad, said what? Former Alabama QB.
This is on our friends at WJOX, Jocks down in Birmingham on McElroy and Kubelik in the morning. Greg McElroy, Alabama star quarterback, former Alabama star quarterback, now a big analyst with ESPN, said in a 16-minute statement to open their show, and I credit an Alabama guy for saying all these things, right? You know, from being able to distance himself enough from the situation, being an Alabama guy to say, you know, what's true. I've been on the radio 9 years. I've had to cover some very difficult and uncomfortable stories. This is the worst. It's the worst for a whole bunch of reasons. One, a mother is dead in her early 20s. Two, it involves my school. I'm a proud graduate of the University of Alabama. I have multiple degrees from the university. I think what Nate Oates said yesterday was despicable. Despicable. I can remove my allegiance from what was said yesterday. It's an embarrassment. And this whole situation for all involved is tragic. He is a phenomenal basketball coach. Operative word there, basketball coach. Phenomenal. But what he said yesterday in the press conference was flat out embarrassing. Absolutely uncalled for, completely unsympathetic, and completely ridiculous. That from Greg McElroy, former Alabama quarterback. I agree with everything that he said on Nate Oates' part of it. And it's why Nate Oates ended up releasing a statement last night, you know, clarifying and apologizing for what he said in the press conference.
Yeah, and saying he used poor words. He wished he would have used better language in the way he was trying to express what he meant to say, but said nothing to clarify anything about why he felt that way regarding not disciplining Brandon Miller, which he says, hey, we've known about this. This isn't something new. Wrong place, wrong time. Left out the victim and other things. But again, it was a direct question where he answered about that in NBA scouts and how the NBA scouts would certainly have to dig and do their due diligence as well. But the statement that clarified things today reads, I thought it was important for me to clarify the unfortunate remarks I made earlier. This entire time I've tried to be thoughtful in my words relative to this tragic incident, and my statements came across poorly. We were informed by law enforcement of other student athletes being in the vicinity, and law enforcement has repeatedly told us that no other student athletes were suspects. They were witnesses only. Our understanding is that they have been all fully truthful and cooperative. In no way did I intend to downplay the seriousness of the situation, of the tragedy of that night. My prayers continue to go out to Jamia Harris's family. That from Coach Nate Oates, who his team will be in action this evening, back in SEC play against South Carolina.
Look, and the tragic part about all of this is, and I do believe that Nate Oates did not recruit Darius Miles originally, if I've got my timing right on that. But bottom line is, Alabama basketball brought a kid on campus who ultimately killed someone less than a mile from campus, right off of campus. And that's the tragic part of all this, and a mother. So let's keep all of that in mind, regardless of what anyone thinks about it, Alabama fan or not. That is the main story here, that a young woman lost their life in this whole thing, and it's a tragic situation. And again, there's not oftentimes you talk about a college sports team and murder in the same sentence,
right.
And that's what we have here with this Alabama basketball situation. And it's an embarrassment for Alabama basketball. The way Nate Oates has handled it and what he said yesterday, as Greg McElroy stated, is an embarrassment.
Well,
we'll see where it goes from here.
I've heard people discuss, like, how will Alabama handle this on the court? They've been handling this on the court.
Yeah, they're fine. I don't think they're going to be. I said this yesterday. You know, they're not going to be affected by this. They played a game in Nashville against Vandy and looked fine, and won pretty easily the next night. Yeah, they've lost a couple of games since this happened to Oklahoma and Tennessee, but they're still the number one overall seed in the tournament, and they're going to have a great shot to cut down the Nets in Houston.
We are very close to the start of the Major League Baseball
season.
Excited about that. And one of the best from the mound bringing the heat for Outkick.com is Curt Schilling, and he joins us in studio here at 6th and Peabody, and you can catch the Curt Schilling Baseball Show launching this Friday and every Tuesday and Friday at Outkick.com. Curt, good to have you in, man. Hope things are well.
We searched long and hard for a name for the show, so the creative people went to work on that.
It works, though.
I do like that it says exactly what it is, right?
Yep,
I like a show that tells me exactly what I'm getting, and that's what it does.
And that's what I'm probably best known for, good and bad. You'll get what I think.
Well, I mean, the rules changes are top of mind. I'm sure you have thoughts on that for Friday's launch. Of the rules changes that we're going to see, which one do you believe helps the game the most?
I don't think any of them help the game.
Okay.
I really don't. I think the one that's kind of under the radar that's going to have I think it's going to have a game-changing impact is the limited pickoff throws.
Because it's a stall tactic.
Well, but imagine Ricky Henderson at first base being told, okay, the pitcher can no longer pick off throw. He has to step off, disengage the mound to throw. I mean, like,
take off. Skills are up.
Well, what you end up doing as a base runner is you get what's called a one-way lead. When runners aren't going, good runners, they'll take a very long lead because they're always going back, so they're not going to get caught. You'll have runners after that second pickoff throw, and you'll have runners pushing the envelope to get those throws. And I just think it could end up being something that delays the game because now I can't make that third pickoff throw, so I'm going to step off the mound. Well, the pitch clock starts again. I got another 20 seconds. You know, those kind of it's gonna be interesting. And I don't really honestly believe that any of them. The shift, teams are just going to bring the opposite outfielder in as a fifth infielder. The opposite outfielder. You know, if you're shifting to the right from a left-handed pull hitter, you bring the left fielder in because hitters have proven they won't try and hit against the shift. But you might start seeing some hitters actually do that if an outfielder vacates a position to come in and play the infield.
There are always loopholes to even rules adjustments, right?
That's you find as a good manager, you find your personnel's strengths and you play to them, right? And so when you have David Ortiz is a great example. David probably hits 15 to 20 points higher if the shift's illegal in his career, I think, because he hit into the shift all the time. And I always just said, if you take one game and bunt 4 times down the third baseline, they'll stop. You know, but that just doesn't happen. And you know, a guy that jumps to mind for now you're talking about versatility, right? If you've got a guy who in the outfield can play an infield position, he becomes a little bit more valuable on a limited roster. A guy like Dalton Varsho, who went to Toronto, can play all 3 outfield positions and catch and play around the infield. He becomes kind of like an NBA sixth man in a sense, where he's incredibly valuable for his ability to move around the field.
Curt Schilling in studio with us on Outkick 360.
So I heard or saw someone said the new bases look like huge pizza boxes out on the field. Most people would hear this say, why would you enlarge the bases? It's a safety issue is what they're going for, right? What do you make of this?
Well, if you wanted a safety issue, you'd do what fast pitch softball does, and you put an alternative base in foul territory that the runner uses and the hitter doesn't, or the first baseman doesn't. My problem is that when the game was made, it's mathematically perfect. The infield is mathematically perfect. 90 feet appears to be the space needed for 300 to be a Hall of Fame average. 60 feet, 6 inches, home plate to the mound. You know, if it's 60 feet, batting averages are drastically different. You give somebody 6 inches on a fastball at 95, it changes everything. I don't know that really – I don't think – I mean, you're talking about 6 foot average, 6 foot guys, 200 pounds, athletes. I don't know that that's even going to make any difference other than it's going to change. Think about it. What does everybody say? Game inches. Inches matter on a baseball field. And so, that might have something. I just think it's going to look stupid, but I mean, it might have something to do. I don't know how that's going to change the game, if it will at all.
So if you're playing today, are you playing for the Mets based on the money being shelled out right now by their ownership? And is that, it's obviously good for players, driving up the market, driving up the price, but is it ultimately good for the game?
Well, I mean, the problem is, I think what you meant to say at the end there is it ultimately good for the business.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a good point.
$10 billion year business, right? Players are not loyal when they leave for a contract, but teams are apparently okay when they cut a guy for a contract. As a player, my owner's not going to pay me money he doesn't have. That's the way I always looked at it. they could solve all of the revenue issues if they pooled their money and split evenly. They won't do that, right? I mean, I was a player rep for many, many years, and in the 94 work stoppage, I was in negotiations. These are 30-some very greedy billionaires, which is fine. And you know, like anything else, you made the investment. Hey, you do what you want to do, but you better be ready for the ramifications of Peter Angelos destroying a once proud Baltimore franchise for no other reason. He just didn't feel like it's not like he didn't have the money. He didn't want to spend it. And, you know, a great fan base has been disenfranchised in Baltimore because of it. Now they're coming back, though, which is kind of nice to see.
How much easier do you believe it would be for you on the mound today compared to when you pitched?
Well, listen, I swore on a stack of Bibles I would not be that guy when I retired. I wouldn't be the guy like saying, oh, my God, if we made this kind of money when we played, because the money is in the stratosphere now. The game is different. The problem is pitchers aren't brought up like I was brought up anymore. You know, everybody wants to get on the pitchers for it's hard for me to watch when a starting pitcher tips his cap coming off the mound in the sixth inning. Like, that's embarrassing to me. But I was raised differently. I had almost 200 innings in the minor leagues in multiple seasons. I had almost 600 innings in the minor leagues before I got to the big leagues. They're raised differently now. When you put $5, $6, $7 million into a draft pick, it's not about his future. It's about this kid needs to get to the big leagues for our return on our investment. So they protect him. They have pitch count, and you know, the fine line between sabermetrics and old school baseball is straddled by very few guys. Teams are one way or the other. Most of them have gone very sabermetric oriented, which I think Tampa Bay learned a couple of years ago is going to lose you a World Series when they took Snell out in the seventh inning of a World Series game that they would have won. But at the same time, I don't think I've ever seen as much young talent in the game as there is right now. It's insane. I mean, the Padres, are you kidding me with that lineup? The Padres and Dodgers, and by the way, the Dodgers signed J.D. Martinez to be their DH. This is a 30, 40 home run guy that nobody's talking about in the middle of a monster. There's going to be some monster lineups, and I still believe Mike Trout's the best player anybody alive will ever see. Hopefully he stays healthy. Ohtani, no one's ever seen what he's doing. Nobody. And it's special. I mean, he's not just the ace of the staff. He's the best hitter on the team next to Trout, who's a Hall of Famer. He's a guy that's going to bust the $50 million barrier, I think, annually.
It's a shame they're playing where they are.
Well, but is it? They're in California. Isn't that a big market?
I would think, but
right.
I mean,
but it's so second place the Dodgers, as you know, in that market. I mean, it's a distant fourth almost.
But you go back to 2002 when they were in the World Series, it was packed. It was a great city. Cities become baseball cities when the teams win. Period.
I don't know how you have those two guys where Curt Schilling said the best player alive that I'm going to see alive is in Anaheim, and I don't watch him play.
And the most unique play. Yeah, and that's it, right? This is Vladimir Guerrero in Montreal.
Yeah.
Right? It's sad that you had to see Vladimir Guerrero's Hall of Fame speech and highlights to understand, oh, my God, he was a Hall of Fame player. Anaheim is that market, right?
And you've seen it also, Curt. I mean, you know, in Boston, obviously a huge market, huge baseball town always. In Philly, big baseball market, big market
and those
in general.
Those markets travel, too.
But Arizona, right? I mean, you talk about if you win, they'll come. I mean, that's a very young franchise. You win a World Series there, so – you've seen it firsthand that when you start winning, anywhere can become a baseball town.
Well, I think speaking of Arizona, you know, Florida's another one. I believe both Florida franchises are doomed. I mean, I hear Tampa talking about this. And the problem is, and it's always been this way, people in the Florida and Arizona markets aren't born and raised in Arizona and Florida. They're transplants. People move to Arizona and move to Florida from Chicago, from Boston, from New England, all the warm other states, and they bring their teams with them. Both states have spring training for all the clubs, so you don't have a homegrown Tampa Bay Ray, which is why I think Nashville would be an awesome place for the Marlins or the Rays to land. I think Vegas is going to end up with one of the franchises, but I think both those franchises need to go someplace else if they want to survive long-term and move up the pay scale ladder and get competitive.
So when you were on ESPN, I thought you were the best at baseball analysis while you were there. How much fun is it now for you to have this forum to talk about baseball twice a week during the season, spring training with Outkick, and be able to really get back to that and talking about exactly what you want to discuss within the game?
Gary Schreiber is the guy that got me hooked onto this, and I've been kind of using him. I know, like most sports fans, I think I know everything about everything, and I'm way smarter than the head coach on Monday morning when I'm quarterbacking decisions. But baseball is the one thing I think I know as well as anybody alive. I've spent my life since I was 4 in it. I've gotten the distance between the game and I is something I didn't expect to have happen after I retired. And it's become, for a lot of different reasons, it's become bigger than I wanted. But it's the one thing I think I know. It's the one I know I can teach. I know I can and talk. I think one of my strengths as a color guy on baseball was I could explain things that fans would understand. Fans don't want to hear that Ohtani's got a 2.2 ERA on the road. They want to hear about the discussion on the mound. What's actually being said?
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10 has nothing to do with baseball. I mean, listen, Scott Rowland in the Hall of Fame. My favorite Scott Rowland story is the fact that in old Joe Robbie Stadium where the Miami Dolphins were playing, on an off night, Scott Rowland was hanging off the upper deck by one arm and almost died. That's one of my favorite Scott Rowland stories.
And now I can't wait to hear this story on the Curt Schilling baseball show.
Short version of it, in 98, end of the season, we had a hurricane. And so they canceled the first 2 games of the series. So I bought $5,000 worth of paintball gear and a barbecue grill and steaks and took like 15 guys to Joe Robbie because the stadium's not going to blow down. And we spent the night there playing paintball. and he almost died. And it was tragic and awesome at the same time. So, yeah.
He's hanging up to avoid your paintball shot?
No, Paul Bird surprised him in the upper deck, and he fell and rolled off the top deck and was literally hanging off the top deck of Joe Robbie Stadium by one arm.
Best manager playing the game within the game. The mound visits, the strategy.
I'll tell you what.
Okay.
The guy that I played for that I think is the best game manager I've ever been around is Buck Showalter. I never saw him outmaneuvered as a manager. The matchup might not have worked, but he always had the right guy at the plate or the right guy on the mound when the game mattered the most. And I think early in his career, he got, like everybody else, he got a reputation that followed him that really wasn't true. Terry Francona, best people manager by a wide margin.
Ego-wise, you mean? Like
no,
managing the player?
Just managing the people. You cared about Terry. And I always say, when I played for guys, I played the game one way. And I played for a lot of managers. But I felt differently when I played the game and did something successful for a guy I cared about. Right? Tito's opinion of me mattered. So, in Johnny Padres, like my pitching coach, my first pitching coach, the guy who made my career, when he would tell me, hey, you threw the hell out of the ball tonight. Like, that was like, oh my God, like that was earth-shattering to me. You wanted their approval, guy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So when you work for people and work with people you care about, you take things differently away from the game. And Tito was a guy that could get you to buy all in.
And you were getting praised for going 6, like you're saying, or 9.
I wasn't. I was taught to go 9.
Yeah.
That's 27 outs. Those are your outs. And one of the things I learned, John, so many things I learned from Johnny. I'm being paid $10, $13, $15 million. I'm not being paid to pitch. I'm being paid to win. That's a very different mindset. A lot of guys are, hey, it's cool. I'm making a lot of money. I got to pitch. I hated losing so much that I swore to myself I would do whatever I could between a loss and the next start to never have it happen again. And so the game consumed me when I played.
Toughest out right now would be Trout, right? If you say he's the best player that I'm going to see live.
No. So I can't. I just forgot his name. The kid that the Minnesota, I think Minnesota traded him, the guy, the contact hitter who doesn't ever strike out. I can't remember his name. Guys that don't strike out were because I watch video. So, and I had hitters tell me, guys in our lineup are psyched out before the game starts because they know you've watched them hit more than they watch themselves hit. If you strike out 100 times, Aaron Judge, great example, great hitter, MVP and all that stuff. If you strike out 120 times, I'm going to find your holes and I'm going to throw my fastball there. And there's nothing you can do about it.
He's going to hate you.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that was why. So guys like Tony Gwynn and Ichiro, when I played, Billy Miller, guys that put the bat, I couldn't make them swing and miss. They were problems for me. So that was where I transitioned to becoming my own defensive coach in a sense, where I positioned my fielders. And I remember Luis Gonzalez in Arizona. I told him, hey, I want you to play way in here, on this guy in this way. Tony Gwynn. want you to play in. And I brought my center, Steve Finley, over to left center, and he said, what if he hits it over my head? I said, that's my fault. If I throw a pitch he hits over your head, then that's on me. But I'm going to throw the fastball down and away. He's going to hit a line drive to left, and I need you to be in this spot when he does it. And so, and that was why when I lost, I took it personal. And a lot of guys didn't want to put that investment into it because then they became accountable. If I do all the preparation and I've done everything I can do to go out there and win and leave nothing to chance, and if I lose, it's my fault. Well, it is, and that's how it works.
Yeah, I think the assumption would be if you've made it to the top of your sport, you hate to lose, that you're a competitor.
Yeah.
But I think it's evolved over the years. But, when you were playing even, Curt, did you come across guys that you just couldn't understand? And you're probably more of an exception, but that you couldn't understand, like, hey, why are you not more angry that we've lost 7 straight?
Listen.
Or whatever's going on with that season.
And to some guys, for me, as a position player, I think that was a strength. Scott Rowland just wanted to show up and play and go home. And he showed up and played like Hall of Fame caliber third baseman and went home. And I remember guys like J.D. Drew. The knock on J.D. Drew was always, this guy doesn't – he went to Philadelphia or to Boston, and the fans were mad because he just didn't seem to care as much as they did. Well, no, that's just who he is. He wants to go hunting, and he can't wait to get his next tag. But in the meantime, he'll go 2 for 4 and have a 370 on-base percentage and do all the things. But you spend so much energy getting mad at a guy who doesn't get as emotional as you. And a lot of guys, for JD, that was his strength. There are other guys who they lie about it. I was 0 for 4, so what? And like everybody, nobody. The guys that tried to make it seem like baseball or the sport was, hey, this is not who I am. It doesn't define me. I'm way smarter and bigger and better. Well, you know what? Bullshit. The fact of the matter is when you're during your career, it does define you. Afterwards, be whatever you want. But when you're a player, and that's what you're known as.
No BS with the Curt Schilling baseball show. That's for sure. That's coming up Friday, the launch of it, Outkick.com. Every Tuesday and Friday is when it will drop. We're excited about this.
Thank you.
We love the name of it. We said this yesterday when we saw this.
We're baseball guys, so we'll be watching for sure. This is exciting.
Well, I'm excited to be a part of this team. This is a group of people that I think we're trying to grow something here and become, dare I say it, become a bar stool. But focused on things that I think we're tailoring ourselves to the crowd that actually shows up at the game, right? I think a lot of sports are trying to do things to get a crowd of people to like them that don't actually buy tickets and come. And I think Outkick is focused on the stories that matter, that everybody's talking about. And
to actual sports fans.
It's
not to a mob.
Right. And we're okay taking on the why didn't these guys wear the gay pride jersey, or why are they having the, this night at whatever. We're all right talking about that because I think at the end of the day, we don't take our work home with us. Just like I don't take my sports and never have taken them home with me.
Check it out this Friday, and really looking forward to it. Hopefully we can do this more often as we dive into once the season gets going. Speaking of Outkick, we got Clay Travis coming up next.
I heard him. I know. He has something to do with this.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Curt, good. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks,
man.
guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Curt.
Curt Schilling has been our guest. Clay Travis next on Outkick 360.
So can you explain to the viewers who might not know anything about MMA, and I got to be honest with you, I'm a casual UFC fan. I watch the big cards, but I'm not an expert in the nitty-gritty. Like, what is the traditional path for, like, an MMA guy if he's chasing to get to the top of that world? Like, what's that look like? We know what it looks like for football. We know what it looks like for basketball. How's that play out for an MMA fighter?
Well, I mean, that's the big difference between MMA and like the traditional sports you're talking about. Like, you have the collegiate, that line of going, and mixed martial arts, you don't really have. I mean, you have the wrestlers aspects, but being a good wrestler doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a great MMA fighter. So it really looks a lot different for everybody. I mean, I was a traditional martial artist as a kid growing up, and then I found MMA was big because when we were around the same age when I was in high school, that's when the UFC started, like Chuck Liddell and all those guys started building the sport like crazy. And that's how I found it. I was just originally actually a hockey player. I played competitive high school. I played junior hockey.
Oh, you played juniors? Where at?
Yep. I played on the East Coast in the EJ, East Coast Hockey League. So yeah, and not East Coast Professional Hockey League, but EJ was up in the north. It was good. It was good hockey. We played again. I mean, I see guys I played against that are in the NHL all the time, and I went to a high school literally just for hockey. I went to a prep school for a little bit just for hockey, and that was like my initial that's what kind of gave me that competitive athletic part of myself that I was definitely able to apply into the military, and I was definitely able to apply into fighting as well. So what happened is my senior year of high school, I was playing juniors. I decided that I wanted to come back to high school to play for my high school just because of, I don't know, girls and stuff or something. I don't know why I did it, but I came back to my high school. I came back to my high school hockey team. I played it. We were doing really good. It was a playoff game, and my first shift of the game was like big playoff game. I blew out my shoulder. I went to go hit a kid, blew out my shoulder. So my following year, I missed a lot of like the times we hit tryouts in the summer to play for the teams in the next winter for like good junior teams. And that's kind of when I picked up MMA because like I wasn't, you know what I mean? I kind of got more into MMA then. I was like, it just kind of gave me an outlet that wasn't, I was pulling my energy into hockey. Now this gave me a separate outlet, and it was MMA, and I got competitive into that. Did that for 2 years, and then until I eventually joined the military. So I think MMA fighters, they really could come from any branch, you know what I mean? But like for me, I played a lot of other sports growing up, and I think that helped me train like a professional athlete to be a professional MMA fighter.
So I got to ask, what's it like to get punched in the face?
Obviously I try not to get punched in the face as much as possible. I do not like to get punched in the face. I feel like, which is probably not a good thing, but over time you kind of get used to it. You know what I mean? I don't even blink my eyes when I get punched in the face. I remember when I used to get punched, get rocked, you get this adrenaline feeling like, oh my God, what happened? I don't really get that too much. It's either I'm getting knocked out or I'm just okay. So, it's not the best feeling, but I try to avoid it. I try to be smarter because concussions, you're hearing all these things about concussions this day and age, and I try to only do my hard sparring only when I need to for my fights. I used to, when I was a kid, I used to just, let's go spar. It's fun. I love it. You know what I mean? Not anymore. I try to be smart about what I do.
Well, when it comes to the preparing for a fight, now what's your record as a pro since you've gone pro?
I am 5-1.
5-1. And
yep.
That's wildly impressive. So if you were an NFL team with that winning record, you'd be amazing, right?
Alabama AD Greg Byrne, in a clip that was played on Feinbaum, says that Brandon Miller is in South Carolina, and, quote, we expect him to play this evening, end quote. They've been playing him since January 15th. They've known about this. Nate Oates told us that yesterday. Continuing other takeaways from Greg Byrne's first public comments. He says that the school found out, quote, new facts yesterday. Says the deadly shooting occurred just seconds after Brandon arrived. And he says that Coach Nate Oates did not handle his comments yesterday as he should have, and that's been addressed. Clay Travis joins us from Outkick.com, and we'll be definitely discussing this throughout the chat today. Clay, what do you make of the way Alabama has handled this?
I think it's shameful, disgraceful, and indefensible, and also par for the course for SEC sports, where schools know that literally no matter what their star athletes do, fans will defend them. And that's where adults have to step in and do the job and be stewards of the university and make the right choice for the university, even if it upsets fan bases. And Alabama didn't do that. And whether it's Nate Oates, whether it is Greg Byrne, the athletic director, I'm not sure who the president of the University of Alabama is, but it's a huge black eye for the university as a whole to allow this guy, Brandon Miller, to continue to represent the school, given that he delivered a murder weapon that was used to kill a mom just off campus. And the standard is, we're getting a text that you need to deliver a loaded handgun to one of your teammates is not enough to get a player to no longer be able to represent the school. Then I think the standard for basically, Nick Saban could be Jeffrey Dahmer, and Alabama fans would be fine with it.
Clay, how do you're a lawyer, so how do you handle lawyer statements, right? The attorney for Brandon Miller released a statement recently, and basically their claim now is that he had no knowledge the gun was in the car, that it was hidden underneath some clothing in the back seat, and he was just simply driving to go pick up his buddy, and then his buddy went in there and got the gun out of the back seat and then shot someone with it. How do you, in general, as an attorney, handle those statements?
First of all, specifically, Brandon Miller was texted that Darius Miles needed his gun and needed him to bring it to him. So at 1:38 a.m., I believe, I tweeted out a screenshot of that text message. So you have to argue that he didn't know that that text message ever arrived in order to believe that he didn't know. Also, do we really believe that somebody has a loaded handgun in your car and you have no idea it's there?
No, I don't.
Yes, right. So the lawyer's job is to be an advocate for his client. So when you are a criminal defense lawyer, and I've been a criminal defense lawyer before, you look at all of the evidence in question, all of the facts that are involved, known, that are out there, and you try to craft the best possible defense for your client. That's literally your job. So I don't get too worked up one way or the other about what lawyers say, because that's the job of a lawyer in the adversarial system. I mean, I've represented people charged and convicted with murder. I've represented people who were charged with dealing drugs. I've represented people who were charged with domestic assault. Like, that is the job of an advocate in the criminal justice system. So, that is not a surprise to me at all that a player who will one day theoretically be a multimillionaire would have aggressive legal representation trying to defend him and keep him from being charged with accessory to a crime that would cost him potentially tens of millions of dollars. So I don't get worked up one way or the other about that. I mean, both sides have advocates, and the job of a reasonably intelligent person is to consider both the sides of the argument that are made, and then to analyze what is likely to be truth and what is likely to be fiction. And so that's basically what juries are, hired to do, right? That's what juries do in our criminal justice system. So I think a lot of people use whatever lawyer defense is put out there as some sort of gospel truth, when in reality it is a slanted version that is designed to protect the client.
So Alabama has released, Alabama Athletics has released a statement. So many statements with this over the last 24 hours. I'll read in part. Today's statement from Brandon's lawyer adds additional context that the university has considered as part of its review of the facts. Based on all of the facts we have gathered, Brandon remains an active member of our team. Clay, they're acting as if they learned about this yesterday when Nate Oates clearly explained that they knew about this from the jump. But now they're pointing to new facts. If there's new facts, I don't understand why they didn't get to this yesterday instead of just saying, yeah, we've known about this, guys, nothing to see here. And, oh, by the way, he's been playing since January 15th as well.
Well, first of all, if you don't know all the facts of this story, it's a willful blindness, right? We're not talking about New York City or Chicago or LA, some major city where there is a huge apparatus that is surrounding the criminal charges or something like that. This is Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and these are athletes that are involved in a murder. They are going to get every bit of information that they need if they want it, right? The Tuscaloosa Sheriff's Department is not hiding information from the University of Alabama if they pursue it. Hutton, you have been in Nashville for a long time.
Yes.
What do the Tennessee Titans in a much bigger city of Nashville know anytime that a Titans player is involved in a criminal-related incident? How much information, based on your experience, do the Titans get about all of those incidents?
Based on experience, they get a head start. That's what they get. They get a head start on the information.
Everything.
Yeah.
Before the media knows, they are tipped off. They are aware that so-and-so may be getting charged with a crime. There may have been an incident. Long before it hits the paper, they know everything about it. I think what happened here was Alabama was hoping that this information would not come out till after the NCAA tournament, and that they would then be able to say, oh, we had no idea about any of this. I think there is no doubt that Brandon Miller is being treated differently than if this were a walk-on player. I think they would have kicked the walk-on player to the curb under the same facts immediately. Again, I think the University of Alabama should be ashamed of itself. The clear standard here is we don't care that one of our star players delivered a murder weapon that was used to kill a mom. We're going to play him because it makes it more likely that we're going to win a basketball game. And we know that Alabama fans will line up. And look, I'll give you a preview. When Brandon Miller gets introduced, whenever the next Alabama home basketball game is, it's going to be like Jesus himself suddenly returned to Bryant Denny, whatever the basketball arena is called.
Coleman Coliseum.
They're going to stand. Coleman Coliseum.
They'll drop 7.
They are going to stand and cheer like Jesus himself just descended from the heavens and alighted at midcourt for Brandon Miller. And again, this is what fans do. And this is why adults have to make adult decisions. Remember, Ray Rice got a standing ovation at the Baltimore Ravens' first training camp practice after he knocked out his fiance. People specifically chose to wear Ray Rice jerseys to practice to honor and support Ray Rice. I mean, heck, Ray Lewis has got a statue outside of Baltimore Ravens Stadium, and he was charged with double murder in an Atlanta homicide that is still unsolved. No one has ever been convicted of the double stabbing death murder there. So, fans are capable of willful blindness when talented players represent their school. And everyone else in the country is looking down on Alabama fans. But most other fan bases in the country, many of them at least, if they had a star player in the same situation and they felt like they could keep him eligible, would do everything to try to do that. Fan bases. Most universities recognize that any individual athlete is a tiny percentage of the overall brand associational value of the University of Alabama. And so understand that they have a larger responsibility to the university as a whole than simply trying to keep fans, most of whom never will attend the university, happy.
Well, and Clay, stuff happens on college campuses and, things happen with teams and all this, but we're talking about murder here, right? It's just so extreme. And Nate Oates' response to it has been so poor. Yet Alabama, a night after all this breaks, just comes to Nashville and systematically beats Vandy in a ho-hum game and continues to roll along and win games this season. It has not affected them at all up to this point. So how does this affect Nate Oates in terms of how we view him and his career now moving forward? Because he's clearly a guy that's just going to keep winning at Alabama or wherever else he ends up. Is this just a little footnote at the end of it, or is this always something that's going to come up when you talk about Nate Oates' career?
Well, I think it's going to make it hard for him to leave Alabama, honestly, because I think a lot of other fan bases are going to remember this story, and it's going to tar and feather Nate Oates as a result. So I think
you lost Clay. A little snipe action there. Just wanted to make sure it wasn't a pause.
We'll look
there we
at
go.
this.
Sorry, Clay, go ahead.
We'll look at this. Yeah, a lot of other schools will look at this and say that they consider him to be toxic, and so he won't be able to go elsewhere.
Clay, could you see potential for a civil suit in this against Miller?
Yeah, I mean, I think there'll certainly be a civil lawsuit. I'm not sure if you guys can still hear me.
We got
but,
you.
I think 100%. I mean, I would be stunned if the woman who was murdered, if they don't file a wrongful death lawsuit naming all sorts of people as defendants, including Brandon Miller, the Alabama player who brought the gun to the murder scene. And so, he'll be named. Certainly the shooters will be named. I mean, look, in a wrongful death lawsuit, what you are trying to do is find the person with the deepest possible pockets. And so that is under which you are acting. And so in that respect, it's kind of a no-brainer. Unfortunately, she's got I believe, a 5-year-old son who doesn't have a mom anymore. And so I don't know what that situation, who's raising that child now. But the estate of this woman who was murdered, I would be stunned if they don't bring a wrongful death suit related to this murder.
The mushroom cloud continues, and we'll see him on the court tonight, according to their AD, Greg Byrne. Clay, appreciate you, man, and always look forward to this each week.
No worries. Appreciate it, man.
Yep.
See ya.
Clay Travis there earlier. Curt Schilling Baseball Show drops on Friday at Outkick.com, every Tuesday and Friday on Outkick.
A lot of Outkick flavor on today's show.
Right. That's right. Coming up, Chad, how much do you think your phone is worth? It's an iPhone 7.
This phone?
Yeah. It is a 7S. Let me get that right. Right?
It is a 7S.
Okay.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out.
We've talked about this on the show.
Too often people won't point out the fact that it is a 7S.
This
not
goes
just
back,
a 7. Thank you.
We were telling the story. Chad has I thought it was an iPhone 6. He clarified for me in Arizona. He goes, no, this is an iPhone 7. In fact,
may I say one thing about Arizona too with this
7S.
phone? With this phone,
yeah.
Every time we go to a restaurant or be out, like you put your phone out on the table.
Yes.
And I felt the need to clarify why my phone is so old, because I would get some weird looks about it, and I'm thinking, I know it's an old phone. I'm trying to hold out as long as I can. It's sort of a bit now on the show that I'm going to hold out and never get a new one until this one just stops working altogether. I want to know what the value would be for the longest working iPhone. You've got some competition, though, because the original iPhone, well, it sold recently at auction. The price tag's next on Outkick 360.
Welcome into Outkick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life. ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
So the higher that number can be, the better you are with the committee. It's really that simple.
You gotta lean into the turns.
You really got to lean into the turns.
He's got incredible taste in which media figures he listens to.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the #1 overall pick.
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose.
The scary thing, Tommy, is in the history of this government, I've never seen them give anything back that they've taken.
Oh no, they never do.
And they won't.
Why are we going through Melania's goods? Don't make Brittany Griner out to be some type freedom fighter. Shouldn't there be a little bit of common sense? Let's roll them, big boy. What do you got?
They want to find someone to be the face of domestic terrorism, and they want it to be a right-wing Trump supporter. Don't let them entrap you into doing something dumb. But they were hyper-rational. They looked at the data, and they said it makes no sense for me to submit to this COVID shot mandate.
Get the shot or you can't go to your brother's wedding. Get the shot or you can't go to your daughter's graduation. Get the shot or else.
The results are in, Chad, and, well, the fans didn't pour in to watch the NBA All-Star.
You mean they weren't drawn in by
draft?
No one was picked James last. Bringing the crown on in slow motion?
No one was picked last, so no one was insulted.
Yeah.
4 million viewers?
4 million, as Colin told us, the lowest rated ever All-Star game. Lowest rated All-Star game ever. Let me try that a third time. To compare that, the reboot of Night Court on NBC back in January had 7.5 million viewers. Now, it's averaging 6.1 million through the run of the show. That is the most watched new network comedy in 4 years, is Night Court.
4.5 million, though, for the NBA All-Star game.
People would rather watch Harry Stone's daughter as the judge than they want to watch LeBron James, the king, in an All-Star game. That's what we learned.
It's rough. Yeah, figure it out. No one was watching the dunk contest either.
No, that used to be the thing I would actually watch was NBA
All-Star
Saturday Night.
Yeah.
Was like the three-point shootout and everything.
Yep.
It was fun when you get into your adult years. You know, it's usually a very cold weekend. It's like a good time to have a few buddies over and have a few pops and watch NBA Saturday Night.
A few pops?
Yeah, there's no...
I love how you get into your adult years and you have a few pops.
Suddenly I live in Prohibition times. Yeah, me and the fellas were having a few pops while watching NBA Saturday Night. I like watching sporting events with absolutely zero stakes at times. Because so many times I'm watching like a team... If I'm watching a team I care about, there's personal stakes for me. So it's fun to watch something that literally has no stakes to anyone involved, like a dunk competition or a three-point shootout. That's at times, that's a nice change-up.
Yes. Chad,
normally I like stakes.
Chad will not be changing up his phone anytime soon. At least I hope not.
Will not.
He doesn't need to get rid of this. The iPhone 7S is the oldest phone that I come across on a daily basis.
I even have the old screen.
Yeah, so it's very similar, though, to the original iPhone on your screen.
I'm going to show the old screen, the screensaver. It's like people see that and they really laugh. Like, you didn't even change from the one that the store gave you. I'm like, no.
So a woman sold an original iPhone from 2007. It was still factory sealed. Sold it for $63,000 at auction.
How brilliant of this woman.
Well,
to do
so
this.
It worked out perfectly based on her job at the time. So she had a contract with Verizon, and at the time, the iPhone was only offered through AT&T, and this was a gift. Someone had gifted this to her. Her name was Karen Green, and yeah, she was gifted this. She put it away in a drawer. I guess she was cleaning out something, found it, sold it. 2007, 16 years ago, and she had just scored a new management job at PetSmart. That's where she was working. Now she gets $63,000 for this original iPhone. Look at the screen on this thing. Some of the apps are similar, but not. I remember like the old Notepad app.
See, I didn't get an iPhone until like iPhone, probably this one.
Yeah,
was the first iPhone I actually got.
I had the BlackBerry for a couple of years before I went all iPhone.
I never had a BlackBerry. I remember in 2007, if we think back to the phones that we owned then, I probably had right around that time like a really tiny like Sprint phone. It wasn't a flip phone, but it was like that, it was like really small.
Yes.
I feel like, remember the Razor also was a big deal?
That
I remember my buddy got a
Razor
and he was just, he was.
The one that bends now?
Well, that's a different, but it was like, it's a Razor, it's like, it was a flip phone, but it was a razor thin phone.
Yes.
And my buddy Jim Brown.
Yes.
Not Hall of Fame running back Jim Brown, but
the Italian.
He'd always look and say, now he lives in Italy, believe it or not. But he would just pull out his phone and go, Razor. Constantly. He would taunt us with it and say, look at this Razor.
Now he's taunting from his
the ads really sold him
Tuscany.
on it at the time. But, now it's the fact that he's Italian. But, yeah, I didn't get an iPhone until 2014, maybe. 2015 is when I made the switch.
I still think this needs to be Evie's first phone whenever you decide that it's time for her first phone.
I think Evie's first phone will not feature any apps.
Oh, okay. By then, your phone's going to be so outdated, it's not going to have any.
Like kids get phones younger and younger. I don't even want to think about giving her a phone right now, but the first one she gets will have no access to social media on it, would be my guess. That's my desire.
Okay.
I don't want people with any ability to contact my daughter until she's 18. I know that's probably far-fetched. She's going to have an Instagram account when she's 12, like a lot of other kids, but I don't want that.
Fun show today. Our thanks to Aaron Torres for joining us, Curt Schilling, Clay Travis. We are back at it tomorrow. jam-packed show as well. Trey Wallace will join us, Armando Salguero, and more. We start at 3 o'clock Eastern each and every weekday right here across the Outkick Network. Thanks for joining us for Outkick 360.